Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Q&A, our live for January. My name is Dave Solberg, the managing editor of the RV Repair Club, and welcome. I just got back from a show in Charlotte where we had over 7,000 people brave what they call a storm, what we call a dusting out there, so the numbers were good and there was a lot of attendance. And I tell you what, the buying frenzy and the excitement about getting out and RVing is there. At least in North Carolina, and then I got to fly back to 18-degree weather, minus 18-degree weather, and start my car. So anyway, it's hard to think about RVing when it's that cold anymore, but I'm glad that people came out. So we have questions already coming in here, and we're going to start off with Pixel Pro asks, I have a Jackknife sofa with all the pumps located underneath. What is the easiest and best way to replace the sofa? It's in a great shape, but from the 1900s. Maybe it's worth something on the History Channel. I can't find a cover to fit it properly. All the pumps. So I'm assuming what she's meaning by Jackknife bed is these are the beds, sofas, I believe, Jackknife sofa, that you actually can lift the bottom part up and the back folds down, so that you can make it into a bed. And kind of ironic, because my first job at Winnebago, I had a gas station for a couple of years. We didn't make any money, and I wanted to play softball and make a living, so I went to work at Winnebago, and the only position available was 60 days on the line, and I put sofas in, Jackknife sofas like this. And the way we did it, and really the sofa is mounted to the floor with either 4 to 6 lag screws, big lag screws, just into the wood floor. So the first thing you need to do is get those screws out, lag screws out underneath it. And then the way we did it was we put the sofa into a bed position and just ran it out in the door, taking it in. And then we also did this on a 2003 Winnebago Brave that we upgraded with a new leather sofa in the inside of it, and did that same thing. And if I remember correctly, with the Brave one that we did, we had to actually angle it a little bit, so it wasn't a complete flat in the bed position. It was angled just enough to get it. It had something in the way. I think the step and the frame of the bed would hit the rail, and because they put additional handrail in it. But I would take that off first, get it to the point where it's kind of flat up sideways, and then you should be able to just get it down to the inside of it. One of the things you might want to do is see if you have somebody locally that will upholster it and get a fabric that you want to put on it, so that you know that you got the right bed going back into that position, because sometimes it's hard to find a bed, especially if it's from the 1900s. So should be able to get that out. Next one then says, GT, I have a 2017 Outdoors Glacier Peak fifth wheel. I noticed that some of the plastic rivets are broken in the shower. How can I find more, and are they easy to be replaced? So normally the plastic rivets that I have seen in a lot of these applications are things that are designed to put up, it's called RFP. It's reinforced fiberglass plastic panels in bathrooms and so forth. And some of your showers have the same thing. And they're just a plastic rivet that's got a little top head on them. You should be able to drill those out and make sure that they're open. And then I would go to a Home Depot or Lowe's, places like that sell the RFP. And then if you go into either the place, if you go into the paneling section, you'll see these reinforced fiberglass panels in there. There's great big white sheets with kind of a bumpy, orange peel type surface to them. So when they drill those in, instead of putting in a screw or something like that, they put a little silicone and use these plastic rivets. If the rivets aren't in the paneling section, then I would recommend going over to the hardware side of it. And I've seen them in there where they've got the regular aluminum rivets, pop rivets and stuff, and then they'll have those plastic ones. And some of them even can be installed without a gun. I think the ones that I've seen typically have a pressure gun that you have to pull, and it pulls some of the plastic coating up and then snaps it off flush. Other ones will have just a little button that you can, and kind of an arrowed teeth in the stem, and then you just kind of pop it in, and that holds it in place. So those are the things that I would look for. Miguel says, I have a 2003 Class A 36-foot Monaco Monarch, and the last time I went camping, I leveled one side. Oops, I got a little pop up there. Too much and heard a noise. It sounded like something popping. And that's not uncommon with the chassis, especially when you get into the diesel pushers, because you got a lot of different suspension items, the airbags. And so your chassis was built by Monaco. I think it's called a Roadmaster chassis. And so it has 2 sets of airbags on each wheel location. And then it's got the suspension system, the axle system in there. You've got a chassis rail with welded components on it. And then you've got slide room mechanisms. So there's so many things underneath there that when you twist it, and I've even had it when you're going into a place, and even before you were able to level, if you just hit a pothole or something, you can hear some kind of creaking in it. I guess the thing that I would recommend, is just to get underneath it with a good flashlight, check all your welded support areas, get up around the suspension system, pay really close attention to how it's driving, how it's handling, and then just periodically run your hand over the tire tread. Be careful that you don't have any metal frays or a steel belt sticking out of it. But if you run your hand over the tire tread and it's rough going one way and smooth going the other way, then it's the start of an alignment issue. So you might have popped something in the alignment. I don't think I would be too concerned, but I would get underneath there and just inspect all those components in there, just to make sure nothing bent or popped loose. And you should be able to see that pretty easy. Miguel again said, on the outside, the rear trim near the roof popped off. How do I repair that? So I'm assuming it's the same 2003 26-foot Monaco. The outside rear trim near the roof popped off. And I'm not positive on the Monaco. They've been bought and sold so many times, but usually the back of those Monacos, the front and the back, are a hard fiberglass trim. That's a molded fiberglass. And so without seeing it, it's hard to say if it's just a trim piece. I would check with the Monaco dealer and see if anybody's carried anything. The problem with Monaco is that they were sold. They were owned by Holiday Rambler at one point, or Harley Davidson. No, sorry, that was Holiday Rambler. But Monaco was its own entity, and then it was sold to Navistar, and now it belongs to Rev. And from what I have heard and seen in a lot of places, some of these components are really hard to find. And so normally what you have to do is look for somebody that can fabricate, whether it's aluminum. It's either going to be an aluminum piece or a fiberglass piece. And so, if you can identify the piece and what you need, if it's fiberglass, that's a little bit easier. If you still have the piece, then you can take it to just about any body shop that does any kind of fiberglass work, and they should be able to fix it, paint it, put it back on. I had a 1996 Monaco that we were doing some video on. You'll probably see it on the site. And we backed it up in the rain, and I hit a cement-filled post and crinkled the front and some trim pieces, and the body shop was able to find them and make it look like new, which I was very, very surprised they were able to do that. So the other option is check with junkyards. If you don't have the piece, if it's completely gone, then you might want to check with some of the salvage yards. There's several big ones in Arizona. You just do a Google search for RV salvage, and you'll see about 6 of the biggest ones in the country. So should be able to find something like that. Tony says, I have a 2018 Winnebago Vista 32-foot. I live in Connecticut. I would love to travel more in sub-freezing temperatures, but I'm concerned about using the plumbing. Is there a system I can install for fresh gray black water tank for the pipes? Or should I just figure something out with a heat tape? Or just drive dry? So yes, there's many options in there. So the biggest thing, you want to protect the water system. I can throw RV antifreeze down the dump tanks, the black and the gray water tanks. I don't have to worry about those. If I put a couple gallons of antifreeze in there, I'm fine with those. The thing I want to be concerned about is you have a 2018 Winnebago Vista. So you have a heated holding tank area. You have a freshwater area. You've got a heat duct that runs in there, and it has a plenum that goes into your service center where you have your freshwater tanks, your water pump, and so forth. The thing that I would be careful about with that is that heat being dumped into that compartment sometimes isn't sufficient enough to keep it from freezing. I've done this myself. If I got a good hard wind and I'm driving in it, or I'm sitting and I got a good side wind that comes into that compartment, the heater that's heating the rest of the coach inside, especially when it gets down into 10 degrees or lower, it's working all the time to heat the upstairs part of it, the main living quarters. And what's going down into that dump tank, you don't have cold air return, so you don't have a good circulation. So sometimes it just doesn't quite get down in there. And a couple things that you can do is, number one, heat pad, like you suggested. And that would just go over the top of the tank or around the tank, or even there's heat tape now that works pretty good. Pirate is a heated electric hose. So coming from your faucet at your campground up to that will heat that going in. I have personally, next weekend, in fact, we have the Buddy Holly weekends called Winter Dance Party, and we use Winnebago supplies a whole bunch of RVs as green rooms for the bands, because they don't have any inside. And every year the bands, of course, they want to use the water, they want to use the toilets and everything. And like tonight, it's minus 10 degrees, so it's warmed up considerably from last night. But we run the risk of freezing those out. So what I typically do is, when we're camped in an area like that and we've got some possibility of substantially below freezing weather, then I would just put a small little auxiliary ceramic heater in that service compartment and just put it on a very low setting and plug it in and let it go. You got to make sure it's not too close to anything plastic, and I've got a couple that dial down pretty low and just give a real a small amount of heat in there. But you have to have electric, and you got to make sure that you don't go over your amp draw. Now, the other options is, like you say, do I just run dry? We've gone to Colorado many times with several different units. I spent 5 years on the road traveling, training dealers, living in the unit and getting into cold areas. And one of the things that I did is I just winterized the coach by blowing out all the air that was in it. And one of your comments, or do I just dry drive? So I throw a couple gallons of antifreeze in the black of the gray water tank, and then I carry gallons of water that I can use. Of course, I just keep some of the water in the refrigerator for drinking, but then I carry about 4 or 5 gallons of water, just keep them in the shower, and I use that for the toilet. So if I, no water in the rest of the system, if I want to use the toilet, I just dump it down there. And then I always just use the shower at the campground in those cases. And I do have to admit, I used the shower a couple times with gallons of water, which is not fun to do. But one other option that I have seen is Lippert makes a product called Floe, Floe, I believe it's called. And it's a small little air compressor that is permanently mounted somewhere in the basement or where it's convenient. And you hook your plumbing system up to it, and then you just go in and hit that on, turns it on, and you go open up your faucets, and it will completely blow out all the water. So if you're going to be camping in an area where it's not below freezing, but then you're going to go to somewhere, you can really do a quick winterizing with something like that. you know, and I've had other people that say that they do the antifreeze, and that they can really quickly pull in antifreeze into it. My only concern with that one is then, you know, you still can't use the shower, but then you have to bring fresh water back in faster. So you got some option. I personally think that, you know, just checking to see where your water system's at, how well it's protected. You know, a lot of your lines are up above floor level, so they're going to be protected by the interior heater as well. Tony, that's the one I just did. He has a 32 Vista. I live in Connecticut. Ronald Price. I have a 2019 21-foot Winnebago trailer. It's Winnebago night tonight, and with one battery. It seems that I should have two, but I really do not know. If I should have two, what type battery should I have, and can you recommend a reasonable installer in North Texas? Well, first of all, you know, how many batteries you need really depends on how much you're going to dry camp. Boondock, not connected to electricity, and how many things you're going to run inside that are going to drain those batteries down. So if you don't do much dry camping at all, one battery will be sufficient, especially in a 21-foot trailer, because you know, you've got to look at energy management. And if you go on the site, we do have some downloads for 12-volt amp draw. So you look at if you're and again, if this is only if you're dry camping. If I've connected to electricity, I got shoreline power. I have my refrigerator runs off of 120. I have my air conditioner always will run off of 120. But I also have a converter then in my distribution center that is charging my battery. So what happens is that when your battery drops down voltage, your converter kicks on at 13.6 volts when it's plugged into electricity, and it charges your battery till it get up to 12.6, and then it drops down to 13.2. So you're always maintaining your battery. You always have battery power for your lights, for your vents, for your water pump, you know, the things that are drawing that battery power. So if you're not dry camping, one is fine. But if you're going to do some boondocking, you're going to go to, let's just say, a rest stop overnight where you don't have electricity and you don't have a way to recharge your batteries, then you will want your battery power to last a lot longer. And one battery is going to probably get you an overnight. And typically, if it's a Winnebago trailer, I would venture to say it's probably a Group 24 battery that only has about 85 amp hours. And the thing with lead acid batteries is you can only use half of those amp hours. So you're talking about 40, 42 amp hours. The average person uses about 25 to 30. So you might get a day, but then, you know, you've got to be able to plug in to charge that battery back or get a solar panel. So, you know, the key is to look at how long you're going to dry camp, how many things you're going to use. The furnace is a big one. You know, look at that download and you'll see that the refrigerator running off of LP is only going to draw, you know, a few amps. The lights, if you got, I would imagine the 2019 Winnebago probably has halogen lights, not incandescent, but those are going to draw about 5 to 6 times what LEDs will. So you might want to upgrade your LED lights. Inside that, they draw 0.1 amp, and you know, then look at the energy management you have in there, and you may want to go to 2 batteries just so you can go a couple days without having to figure out how to recharge your batteries. The other option that I've seen people do is they buy a generator and use the generator to charge the batteries. But some places won't allow you to run a generator after 10 o'clock. Do you want that noise all the time? So, and I would say if you're going to get a second battery, you need to match it to what you have now. You know, I'm not sure what the trailer side uses. I know the motorhome side uses Napa batteries. Napa's a very good battery, but take a look at what battery you have. What is the amp hours? That'll tell you the group rating. And then it's really easy for you to install it yourself. If you just take a look at some of our videos, you should be able, and I would think that 21-foot has a battery tray on the front with enough space to do 2 batteries. You know, let me know if that's the case. If it does, you put the second battery in next to that one, and all you have to do is get 2 cables and go positive to positive, negative to negative. You just created a double bank there. It's already going to the distribution center on the inside of it. So you should be fine just taking the wing nuts off and adding 2 cables and being able to extend the life. So one of the biggest things that I tell people in the seminars and in the articles and all the videos we do, get a good battery. Winnebago uses a good battery, but there's a lot of junk out there. There's a lot of membership clubs that have this RV/marine battery. There's a lot of home improvement stores that supposedly run this deep cycle marine battery. I just never have had good luck with those. They're made cheap. They have thin plates. They use solder to connect stuff that doesn't hold up in RVs. You think about that RV going down the road, you need a more welded connection with those plates, and just it's everything about it's inferior. If you never dry camp, that probably would be okay. But I really recommend taking a look at a good RV battery. The Trojan battery has been really well received. I hear a lot of good things about those. If you want to get up into the Napa's a good one, but again, take a look at what they've got, because Winnebago has spent a lot of time researching those batteries. Randy. Oh, okay. And who's a reasonable installer in North Texas? I'm not sure about North Texas, other than you get into Dallas, and now I just forgot the name. I can see the place. Oklahoma City and Dallas have a dealership that's been around for years and years and years, and we'll have to look at that, and maybe I can get back to you on that. But wish I could. I'll have to get back to you on that, because they're an outstanding dealership. But again, pretty easy procedure. I think you could do it yourself. 2017 Sunseeker on a Mercedes chassis. Is there a way to add auto leveling? My shop says no. Sunseeker, I would think that is a Class C chassis. And so Mercedes makes a couple different models. If it's a Class C cutaway chassis, meaning they make the cab and dash instrumentation, and then it has a frame rail cutaway, and the dealer or the manufacturer built on the backside of it, which I think the Sunseeker is, you should be able to put some type of a leveling system on that one. If it's the van, like the 3500 complete van, all the underneath of that is a Mercedes and probably molded components underneath it that might make it difficult to put that in there. But when you say my shop says no, no, I'm not sure if that is a RV shop or just some type of a service shop. So what I would recommend is to get a hold of Lippert. They are probably the premier. They bought everybody out, it seems like, but they have several different systems of leveling, and I don't know if I know they have an auto leveling, but again, without knowing the chassis configuration. But if nothing else, even just a 2-point leveling system that would bring that up. So I know there's some systems out there. I would suggest contacting Lippert, or maybe even E-Trailer. They carry a wide variety of product, but I would start with Lippert. Go to lci1.com and go to their customer service department. Their technicians are phenomenal. You go through and you find the leveling catalog of that one. You'll see the different components that are available, and then give them a call. If you're looking at a hydraulic system, that might be where this shop came in with. If you're looking to put a hydraulic system in that, you would have to have a hydraulic pump and then the hydraulic lines and a lot of components. So, that might be where they're coming from. Yeah, I would say you're probably more inclined to put an electric system in it. And if it's a Mercedes, an electric's fine in most cases. But take a look at that and see. And if you already have a slide room, if it's a Class C in a Mercedes with a slide room, check and see if you already have a hydraulic system in that you can tap into that same motor. But some of the smaller ones use electric slides as well. It's not Funtown. Nope. Sorry. She was Google searching. Keep looking though. Hi there. How can I bypass the transfer switch to keep our residential fridge running while plugged into shore power? How can I bypass the transfer switch? Okay. Jim Cat says, how can I bypass the transfer switch to keep our residential fridge running while plugged into shore power? And I guess I'm at a blank on why that would work, because the transfer switch that I'm thinking you're talking about, there's an automatic transfer switch, ATS. And when you're plugged into shoreline power, it goes into this automatic transfer switch, and that power goes to your distribution center, which in turn goes to the refrigerator, inverters, so forth. Then if you start the generator up, that automatic transfer switch does just that. It transfers within the box and says, don't use the power coming from the shoreline cord, use the power coming from the generator. And the generator is the default. So if the generator's on, that'll be on the generator switch side. And it does the same thing though. It powers 120 volt power to the distribution center. And then you have an inverter in residential. Now the refrigerator with a residential one, it wants to run, it only runs on 120 volt power. Even though some people say, well, mine runs off the batteries. It's technically yes, but it's still running on 120 volt power. So when you're hooked to shoreline power, you get 120 volts from the shoreline power or the generator, goes through the distribution center to your refrigerator. When you're not plugged into shoreline power, you have a very large battery bank that is taking battery power to the inverter, which is turning it into 120 to your residential refrigerator. So I'm not sure how the transfer switch would come into play in any of that. You know, when you're plugged in, it should go in there. It should go to it. You should have the opposite problem, that if you unplug your shoreline power, if the refrigerator doesn't run, then it's something with your inverter. So I would, you know, and maybe what would be best is to, we need to make in the model a year of the RV and the refrigerator, and you know, send that in on one of the social medias for a question, so we can do a little bit more research on that and find out, you know, where that's at. But that's how that system is supposed to work. So that automatic transfer switch should have nothing to do with working through the battery or the inverter. You know, and maybe it's not transferring. Maybe that's the case. So if you're plugged into shoreline power and it's not working, maybe it's stuck on the generator side. So when you shut your generator off, and then I guess that's a good question to ask, is does it run fine on the generator? Does it run on your shoreline power? Then your ATS switch is not switching over. Hope that helped. I have a Coachman Clipper 17 FQ that will be receiving a brand new awning, including new arm supports in April. What are the best immediate proactive things I can do to preserve the new awning? So there's two types of awnings that are fabric that's used. There's a couple different awnings, but you got either vinyl or acrylic. And the biggest thing, in my opinion, is to wash it occasionally and condition it yearly, and don't roll it up wet. So what happens in an awning is that you get some dirt and dust and so forth in there, and then you get mold and mildew that attacks that. It doesn't really get into the awning itself, but it attacks that portion of it. The biggest issue with awnings is not conditioning them and having some type of UV protection and leaving them out for a long period of time. The other thing I tell people is that I like to do a seam sealer once a year too. So the best way is take a Dawn dish soap with some water, clean the top of the awning really, really good, roll it up, let it sit for about 15 minutes so the underside gets the soapy solution as well, and then roll it back out and clean the whole thing out. A&E has a couple products. They've got a Acrylolite for the acrylic ones, and then the vinyl one, there's a vinyl conditioner. One of the things that we've tested a little bit and we've tried is a UV protection that is called the Protect All. Do I have that here? Yes. Right there. Cool. That polishes, wax, treats, and protects. So it's got a UV blocker into it, and they are saying that it's good for paint, fiberglass, clear coat, gel coat, aluminum, chrome, stainless steel, plexiglass, glass, wood, plastic, vinyl, rubber, and finished leather. The only thing I would be careful with is the acrylic. I do like the Acrylolite with the from A&E because it not only conditions it, but it helps waterproof. That's the thing that you know, these awnings are porous, and so they do need to be conditioned occasionally just to keep those pores kind of filled in and keep them from leaking inside. The seams are going to be stitchings, and so you'll have a hole any place you got an edge seam or top seam, and those seams are just, you know, they're thread, and they can dry out, and if they dry out and you got those holes in there, same thing with those holes, they dry and that gets brittle, and then you know, you have problems. So there are some things you can do. Take a look at we got several videos on awnings, and I think we might have even done a class, but we did show some of that in those videos. So you do that and you'll extend the life of your awning dramatically. And then check your owner's manual for the awning that you get on the arms and lubrication. You know, some of them do a silicone, like a CRC silicone. Others do. I don't think anybody does WD-40 because it actually attracts grit. AZB Long says, I have an inside question about blinds. I have a couple that one side will not go down all the way. I have tried to tighten the string, but with little success. What is the best way to do this? So I'm assuming that you have the pleated blinds that have the string that goes down to the base fabric and goes up into the inside. If you got one side that's coming down further than the other side, then somewhere you have some kind of an adjustment issue. But the only thing you can really do is take that blind off and just get it to the bench and take a look at, you know, once you get it off, you'll see this channel, and in there you'll have either gears or pulleys in there, and just see what's binding inside of it. And sometimes what happens is when you run them up and down, a lot of times the string will start to twist a little bit, and then it could just kind of create a, not necessarily a knot, but a bump that will not allow it to go all the way. So, and I do know that I think her name's Carol, that did some videos, did a restringing of those pleated blinds at one time, but I've had to take those out several times, you know, and redo them, because the problem you get is with those things bouncing all the time. And it may be that you got one side that's stretched out more than the other side. You know, we put those blinds that were built for homes into RVs that get 120 degrees in the summer and 0 degrees in the winter, and then we take them 65, 70 miles an hour down the road, and all that stuff, you know, just creates a lot of additional pressure on those things. So it might be that everything looks like it runs perfectly fine, but one side is stretched out more than the other side, and you might have to adjust and clip off a little bit of string on the up in the inside end. Pixel Pro said thank you, and you're welcome. Christopher Sneller, I have a 95 Winnebago Vectra. The floor doesn't have water damage, but some places flex a lot. Any questions to firm it up? So the Vectra is built like this. This is an actual Winnebago model. that you'll have perimeter wood, like a 2x4 that goes all the way around the outside perimeter sitting on the metal outriggers like this. You'll have a series of outriggers going across the basement of the chassis, and then this is your floor. So you've got a thin Luan panel here. You'll have block foam insulation. You know, this is about a 1/4 inch. They used to use 1/2 inch plywood on this, but they've gone to the 1/4 inch because these are supporting it a little better. And then they call this thermal panel lamination. With that, it typically gives you the structure, but by the time you get a 95 Vectra and you get enough flexing and you know, my guess is this is probably broken down a little bit. I don't know how you can support it from the bottom side. The other thing that happens in some of these, and I don't think with your Vectra too much, but if you let the unit idle a lot, you got a lot of heat coming from the exhaust that would start to break down some of the stuff in here. But the fix that we've always done for soft floors and for flexing is to pull the carpet back and cut this portion out here and put in what we call a ladder. So let's say this is your unit be running here. We would pull this back and build a ladder out of two 2x4s flat and then a series of 2x4s across. And that just gives you so much more additional support on that stuff. So I would venture to say that block foam in here is started to loosen. And you know, you really don't need this for insulation on the flooring section because you got your whole basement down underneath here, and that wood will do enough. So it's a lot of work to do that. I don't know of a way to secure or to firm up from, you know, underneath side, unless you did some angle brackets maybe. You know, we've done some of that in some trailer stuff where the trailer was doing this, and if you went in underneath there and you were able to get some angle iron in a triangular shape and just angle bracket that whole thing up so you keep it from moving. The other thing is, I guess I would ask, is it's saying that you flexes a lot. What's flexing? The carpet? If it's wood flooring, then what's happening there, and it amazes me throughout the years, and I was there in 95 still, and I don't remember exactly, but I see a lot of companies start putting in wood plank flooring. And with this, you don't know, I guess I don't know if it's original flooring or not, but when you start putting in tile or wood plank flooring on the inside, it just, you're asking for problems because you're going down the road and you're getting a lot of flexing out of that chassis, and then you're getting a lot of flexing out of that flooring section because it's not a solid one-piece 1/2 inch flooring like you would have at home, a good foundation. And the more it starts to move a little bit, the more that flooring starts to flex up and back and forth. And so if it's wood or tile doing it, then I would say tear that stuff up and just look at how you can resecure it or go with something different. If it's carpet, then you got to go back to that support underneath it, the underfloor. So Gary asks, I have a 2004 National Dolphin, and when I tried to get electric to go through the converter, there is power going into it, but not coming out. The fuses are okay, but no hot coming out per the meter. Okay. So if you're talking about the fuses, then so let's look at the converter. What he is saying is he has in his unit a distribution center. And this distribution center, I think his 04 would be very similar to this. So you've got 120 volts coming from your shoreline power into this section here. This is your main breaker right here. And then you're going to have air conditioning, refrigerator, whatever 120 volt appliances are in there. So if he's saying, when I tried to get electric to go through the converter, so the converter doesn't have electric. Let's back up. Okay, we need to know what electric, DC or AC. So this is AC. This is the 120 volt coming into here, and it will go out and supply our air conditioners and all other stuff. Then it also has right here is the wire, and where's it hooked up to? This one right here. So that is our converter right here. So 120 volt comes out to our converter, and all this is a battery charger. So this will charge the batteries inside, and then the batteries are going to come up to here, and these are all our 12 volt DC stuff. So these are going to be the lights, they're going to be the roof vents, they're going to be the water heater. So when you're saying that you're not getting electricity coming out of the converter, then I have a couple questions. So the first thing I would do is I would take a multimeter and I would put it onto the DC setting at 20, just like this, and I would put this on the battery. A fully charged battery should be 12.6 volts. So when I flip this on, I go plug in to my shoreline power. I should have 120 coming into here that goes to the outlets. It goes. I then should have this converter here will kick in, and it should do 13.6 volts at my battery. That tells me that if the battery is low, that'll charge. So 13.6, and then when the battery gets to 12.6, that converter will drop down to 13.3. So when you're plugged in, that should be 13.3. That tells you you are getting electricity out of your converter. So when the question you posted is, I'm wondering, are you getting electricity to your interior functions? You know, is that the question? Because all your interior functions run off the battery. They don't run straight off of the converter. So you're getting power through here. If you have no 12 volt inside, then the first thing I look at is, do I have 12 volt coming battery positive, battery negative to start with? Are these fuses good? Because this is a reverse polarity protection fuses. If anybody swapped those out, that will pop these out. And then, you know, what do I have for power into each one of these? And I like, yours will not have these lights down here. That's handy because it initially tells you if those are blown or not blown. But, you know, so do those steps to identify. That's how it works. When you say electricity is not coming out of the converter, you know, there's AC electricity, there's DC electricity, and what's supposed to come out of the converter is DC, 13.6 until it gets to 12.6, and then 13.2. So take a look at those. Okay, Dave Morley, I have a brand new Nexus Ghost. I can start the engine, but sometimes I get an icon that says range inhibited, and I can't get it in gear. Do you know what the problem is? Range inhibited. That I do not know. So I'm wondering if that isn't some kind of a Bluetooth diagnostic. And I guess, you know, to get a little more information is what chassis is it on, is there any kind of a Bluetooth and maybe a picture of it? But you should be able to go into your chassis manual, and I'm assuming this is on the gauges in the engine because it only does it when you start the engine. But the only time I've seen a range inhibited is something to do with, you know, getting a Bluetooth signal or a frequency signal that tells me something, is not, is interfering. And a lot of times, things like this are what I call gremlins, that work intermittently, and then sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Then, if this one doesn't do it all the time, but sometimes, he said. So what I typically find in, especially things that work on frequencies, like your tire pressure monitor system, backup cameras, variety of things like those that have a frequency, you can get a lot of interference when you get into places that have speed cameras, and there's so much floating in the air that it is grabbing information from everywhere. And sometimes you get into larger cities and the backup cameras won't work because they're a weak signal to start with. And these big speed cameras, imagine the power that they have. If they can catch your license plate going 70 miles an hour down the road, they can mess with some of this stuff. And then you get it to the dealer where nothing's going on, and hey, everything works. So I would say look at your owner's manual. You should have something in there, or to get a picture of the icon at some point and give us your chassis. But I have not heard of that in particular being a problem that I've seen at all. Wendy says, we have a 2021 Salem FSX bunkhouse 178. It doesn't seem to have a switch to turn off the inverter converter. Do we have to disconnect the battery each time we park the trailer at home? So you should have, if you have an inverter converter. So I guess again, we probably need a little more information on the inverter, but I am going to show a couple different methods here. So this is the typical distribution center with a converter in the inside of it. If you have a large inverter, which is not part of your distribution center and your converter, this would be, and I call it aftermarket, but I'm just saying because it's not really tied in with this. If you get a larger one, usually a 2,000 watt. Now this is only 700, so this isn't going to give as much of what I'm talking about. But the larger inverters will also charge your batteries. And so when you're plugged into Shoreline Power, it comes through the inverter, and it charges your batteries. And it's a much better charge because it's a multi-stage charge, and it will break up sulfation. Or if you have a set of lithium batteries, it has a lithium battery stage. So it's very adjustable to do that. And I've even seen them down at 1,000 watts. I made the mistake of saying you have to have a 2,000 watt generator or inverter, and somebody says mine's 1,000 and it charges the batteries. This one will not. It's just it's a smaller one designed just to give some power to a few outlets in the kitchen area and the TV from the battery bank. So when you say does seem to have a switch to turn off the inverter converter. So you normally wouldn't have a switch to turn these off. I mean, you would have on your inverter. They all have a switch, like this here. However, typically you don't have to do that when you take it at home and you're parking it. Park the trailer at home and you're not going to use it. You should have a battery disconnect switch hooked to your house battery. Then if you're not plugged into Shoreline Power, none of this stuff is going to power anything. And if you have a battery disconnect switch, that's enabled, it's like take the negative cable off the battery, so then your battery won't get drained by stuff inside, like the LP leak detector and other stuff. So take a look at those functions. You should be able to see how that works. Randy Oakley says, where can I find the old? Did we have I don't think we had a Randy. Randy, if you want to repost that, all I got here is where can I find the old? And that would be me. Pretty sure. As of quite a few years ago, that's where you would have been able to to find that. Now, Angie, you can find the young because she just had a baby boy, excuse me, Elijah. It's not Explorer USA either. Angie's trying. She's trying to find that dealer in Dallas. Try Fort Worth, Oklahoma City. Man, I wish I could remember that. Right on the tip of my tongue. Okay, let's not waste time. Tony says, thanks for the winter driving tips. Oh, you're welcome, Tony. I spent a lot of winters in RVs. I had one in Fargo at -20, and the furnace didn't work. And when I called back to the factory to say my furnace won't work, they say, what's the temperature? And I said, it's -20. And they said, oh, that's the reason, it's too cold. I went, what? Really? I guess what happened is the gauge wire that they used for the thermostat internally and to the furnace, when it got too cold, it would not conduct. And it's like, well, that makes a lot of sense. Sharon says, I have a 2019 Grand Design Image 17 MKE with the SwingTech slides. Here we go, SwingTech. I have had more questions on the SwingTech slide than anything else out in the whole RV aftermarket world. When the temperature gets above about 85 degrees, the slides will not work unless I put them in override mode. If the temperature is below that, so 80 degrees, the slides work just fine. The repair shop has had fits trying to figure out and troubleshoot this problem. Any suggestions? Yes. I would say your batteries are sulfated. And the reason I say that is because when batteries are below 80 degrees, they work really well. When it gets above 80 degrees, that hot temperature, they start to boil inside there, you lose amperage in there. And those SwingTechs take a lot of power. And I would say you probably got 2 or 3 issues with that SwingTech. And SwingTech's getting a really bad rap out in the market. So here's how your SwingTech works. You've got 2 motors inside the walls on that top rail. So you got a slide room that comes out. You got 2 rails on each side, top and bottom. The top rail has the motor with a gear, and the bottom has a cam with a gear. And so when you push the button, it pushes the room out. And it takes a good amp draw to do that. And so when you get the room out to the end, you let the button go. And the way that SwingTech is designed is that you need to leave that button on until that motor shuts itself off. And everybody says, well, I don't want to burn up the motor, everything. It's designed to sync itself back. So think about this. You got a slide room, and you got a couch in one end and something else on the other end. Maybe you have a refrigerator on one end and a tissue box on the other end. Those motors never operate with the same force because of the weight that's on there. So when you get out to the far end, if there's heavy side on here, and you might have a compartment with some stuff in it too. So you push that out, it gets out to the extended part, and you let it go. Okay, well, this motor now didn't work as hard, so it's not synced quite as much. So you need to leave that button on until it goes, and it will shut itself off. Then they're in sync. But too many people are sliding them out, stop. Bringing them in, stop. So they get more and more out of sync, and that means they're working harder, the more amp draw in it. And if your battery is sulfated, it looks like it's 12.6, but it goes right to the ground, and it won't do it. So if now you get to the point where you're above 85 degrees, that battery is getting hotter and hotter and hotter inside that compartment, and I would bet you're not getting the amp draw that you need out of that. Second thing is, make sure your RV is completely level and stabilized before you bring that slide room out. If you have a unit that's sitting there and it's just a little bit out of level, or even if it's level, if you don't have it stabilized, when you start to move that room, that chassis can shift, that weight starts to move, the sidewall will shift. Now all of a sudden you're putting even more pressure and resistance on those 2 little motors that are up there, and it's going to take more amp draw to do that. So level the coach, synchronize those motors, do it every time you bring it in and out. And one of the things that I would recommend is when it gets above 80 degrees, check your batteries. make sure that you've got plenty of fluids in the batteries, that they're probably sulfated, so that makes it even worse. And I would say with your Grand Design, I'm not sure what they use for a converter in that. I know Winnebago uses a Magnatech, but I would suggest finding out if you have a conditioning type of converter. Because what happens with lead acid batteries is when you drain the battery down, the sulfur coats the plates. And if you don't have a multi-stage charger that does a high 14 to 16 volt charge to break up that sulfur, it gets thicker and thicker and thicker. And then it looks like it's 12.6, but the minute you put any kind of load on it, it drops. And the hotter it gets, the faster that's going to happen. So one way that you can test it is when you get above 85 degrees, bring a battery booster with you. And once it gets to that point where it's not working, put a battery booster on those batteries and just see if it will work with that on there. If there's any way you can cool that battery down, opening the compartment. And on the Grand Design, it's up in the front. I'm assuming it's in that front compartment in there. And if it's 2019, I would bet those batteries are probably pretty sulfated by now if it doesn't have a multi-stage charger. So try those things. So what happens, you go back to the dealership and nothing else is on. That's one of the gremlins that you'll see in the CoachNet article I just wrote now, is that, you're out and something doesn't work and you take it back to the dealership. Wow, it works. Well, what was the ambient temperature? The hotter it is, the more the refrigerator is going to run, the more the air conditioner is going to run, the more battery power it's going to draw. You got all these things that you don't even realize are running, and whatever else doesn't work, then it doesn't have enough power or battery power, and so it doesn't work. You take it back to the dealership where it's 70 degrees or less in the service department, and he plugs it into a good campground or good 30 amp service. Nothing else is on in there, and hey, look, the air conditioner works, the furnace works, the slide rooms work, and he's on a nice level pad in. So all that stuff affects the operation of these things, and it again, it's kind of like gremlins. So we're running pretty close here. I want to see real quickly. Harold says, I just bought my first motorhome, 2013 Fleetwood Bounder. Where are the house batteries? Will I need a specialized tool to get at them? Most of the time, Harold, your Bounder, if it's 33C, I'm thinking it's gas. They must be underneath the steps, and you don't need a special tool to get them out. Otherwise, they're very heavy. Phil, I just want to see if Christopher says it's the subfloor. I'll get the flooring all torn out. Keep us informed, Christopher, because that's a project. That is a not an easy thing. Look for low noise generator for me. And a couple of these, I'm sorry we have to skip through it. We're running out of time here, but Ronald asked, I'm looking for a low noise generator for my Winnebago trailer. I just came across at the show this weekend, there is a product called Predator, and it was running at some really low, like 50, 60 dB. I mean, they fired it up, and I was amazed how quiet it was running. But it was a generator inverter, and that's what you want. Generator inverter, you want a clean wave. But the price was like 3,500 watts, was only $350. Now is that a show price? I don't know, but it was very attractive, and that was a pretty good price for a generator inverter. With that, I appreciate everybody coming out. We have McLean's. Thank you, McLean's RV. That's who it was. Angie found it. Don't forget about our download. We have a download on the site. Did Katie post that? Grab your free download, RV Tire Care Tips to make sure your tires don't run over the winter. Grab your free download, RV Tire Care Tips to make sure your tires don't ruin. Well, they also won't run if they're ruined. right? So that you don't ruin over the winter. Just some tips on care and maintenance of the tires. The more you can educate yourself on the tires, the less problem you'll have with them, the longer they will last. So with that, I do appreciate everybody coming out tonight. We are looking at doing February 23rd, I think is the next one. Look for the post. We'll see what's coming with that. And I am heading to Raleigh, North Carolina on the 18th, weekend of the 18th, and then to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania for a big super show. Anybody in the Harrisburg area, make sure you pencil it in, come on down, attend the seminars. It should be one of the largest offering of RVs on the East Coast on this spring. So anyway, thanks for coming out, everybody. I appreciate it, and have a great weekend and stay warm. Yeah.